Welcome back to Against the Cage, your home for all the latest in MMA, including all the best exclusive interviews with your favorite fighters. My name is Jake Aryeh. I'm joined here by my esteemed co-hosts, Scott Fontana and Erich Richter. And my goodness, guys, do we have so much to get to, whether it's White House, UFC 326. But I'm going to start us off here by talking about one of the biggest names in the sport, Ronda Rousey. She had a little bit to say about the UFC White House event, as well as Dana White, the state of the UFC. So let's go ahead and watch some of what she said at her press conference with her upcoming fight against Gina Carano.
I think that most of my criticisms of the UFC now is because Dana isn't the owner and he isn't calling the shots and he isn't running things the way that he wants, because he's an employee of the company now. He's not an owner, and he knows the White House card sucks. Like he knows that they were pushing this for over a year and it fell extremely short of expectation.
Alrighty, so yeah, some juicy stuff. Erich, your box office. I know you love a little bit of controversy. So Erich, I gotta ask you, does Ronda have a point? What do you think?
I mean, Ronda, very honestly, she says a lot of things there in that press conference. And I think that probably the most interesting thing that she said there was that Dana is not running the UFC like he wants to. And he called Dana an employee. She called Dana White an employee of UFC, of TKO, no longer the owner of the company. And I feel like that is kind of the backdrop of the entire card now, is that the UFC isn't able to pony up big dough, it seems like, if they really want to for a big event. It really seems like behind the scenes, this is a company that is run by private equity that only cares about shareholder value. And that is, does she have a point? That's what it seems like behind the scenes. I mean, I'm not there, but the prevailing sentiment, I mean, we could just say it outright. They didn't do the Ronda Rousey Gina Carano card for money. And according to Ariel Helwani, the UFC didn't do the Jon Jones Alex Pereira fight due to money. Now, that gives me, and I said this last week, it gives me loads of concerns about the UFC going forward. They need to be able to make big fights and give the fight fans what they want, not just worry about the bottom line. But I think that the underlying thing here is that this is run by private equity where money is what matters. And who would have thunk it? Dana White is now no longer the reason that the UFC isn't paying fighters as big money fighters. That's what it seems like, at least. It's not Dana White. It seems like it is the private equity and the company behind the scenes. It's really telling you a lot about how the sauce is made right now. Scott, I'd love to hear your reaction, though. It's just crazy.
Look, number one, not even number one. I'm going to say this real quick before we get into the kind of the big piece there. I feel like the Jon Jones thing, as much as, yes, money certainly was going to be a component of that no matter what, Jon Jones could have had this fight if he had played ball with them last year. Retiring when they were basically at the goal line or almost basically gotten this fight reportedly done against Tom Aspinall, and then backing out the way he did. It obviously left everybody with some sour feelings there. And just why are you going to rely on that? I can understand why that made it an extra complicated layer to that particular negotiation. Now back to the overarching thing of what Ronda had said and her accusations and characterization of the modern UFC. I think she absolutely has a point. It sort of looks that way, right? For all the reasons you said, Erich. I mean, but this is not something that's overnight. There's changes that have happened in this Paramount Plus era that is new and that we're still adjusting to, but also a lot of this stuff's been kind of building over the last 10 years, which frankly, for almost the duration of that, Ronda Rousey was not an active member of the UFC. Excuse me. It just, things have changed. It's a different company. For almost 10 years, they're not putting as much emphasis into just making sure they get those big fights, get all the attention. That was the Fertitta brothers. That was Dana. Dana, yes, has progressively seemed to move into a lesser overseeing role, right? He's doing a lot of, front facing. He's still talking. He's still combative. He's still the face of the UFC in every single way that I think they want, and probably he wants publicly. As far as behind the scenes, though, it just seems like his hands are tied. He's I mean, we basically had Ronda Rousey call him all but a cog in the UFC machine now, which that is the thing that's unthinkable to me. The UFC as just Dana as a piece of it is very weird.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that she also said in like her characterization of the dynamic is like, yeah, they're just worried about like next quarter, like the balance sheets,
Yeah.
like what they could say on like this is paraphrasing, but like what they could say on like investor calls and all that kind of stuff. And like feels like Mark Shapiro has kind of become like one of these figures to, at least in my mind, he's like almost the new like the Shogun, and Dana White is like the Emperor, if that makes like a figurehead, if that
Yeah,
makes
he's
any
the new
sense.
Lorenzo Fertitta.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
He,
very very interesting.
yeah. And one thing that I just bring up is that Dana has, and we know this through court documents, has said that he is not super involved in the UFC anymore. Um, this White House kind of shows that, right? Like I feel like Dana, if he was making big time decisions, he would do it differently. It really just seems like it's the Hunter Campbell show, and Hunter Campbell goes to, whatever the numbers person is behind the scenes and sees what can get done, and that's that. It's a way differently run company than it was when I first became a fan back in 2014, 2015, 2016, when it was really fun.
Is it even still like the Hunter Campbell show? Or I mean, it really seems like it's just a bunch of people in suits, you know? Hunter would be one of them. He's probably more of a almost a, and I'm speculating here to some degree, right? He's more of almost a liaison. Like we see him at pressers off to the side. Dana will defer to him and that kind of thing. He'll check in with him and things like that. But his background is legal. That is kind of where it comes from. It's really more the Mark Shapiros, the Ari Emanuels, these type of people. They're the ones who very clearly are running the show here, especially when you factor in all of the pieces that we're getting to this puzzle from testimony from Dana and et al. In this legal case, and also from again Ronda Rousey and her experience. Now, this is one person's experience, but why do we not have this fight in the UFC? It ought to have been there. It really should have been there. It just doesn't seem like there's a hunger to pay the big purses that it's going to take to make these fights anymore.
Yep.
Ronda Rousey underscored that. That's what it is.
Yeah, when she was talking, I mean, I'm not really sure if she outright said it, but like kind of at least what I got from her is Dana in his mind was like, yeah, I would love to do it. It's just like can't get the blessing on, it's too much money, and it's not.
My hands are tied.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned Erich, like sort of it's not what you saw when you were initially a fan in the sport. Dana White used to seem like someone where he genuinely wanted to put together fights because he wanted to see them, not just because it made sense for the company. And to me, it kind of feels like that's gone. Like I haven't seen Dana White be like, I need to see that, like Arman Sarukian fighting for the lightweight title, for instance. Like
Yep.
it's like it doesn't seem like he's very interested in seeing the best fight the best anymore because of himself as a fan. Feels like that's kind of died.
Yeah,
Just to
really.
add to that, Jake, because I want Erich to answer this, but I just want to throw in there too. This is Dana White. He's been in 25 years with the UFC now, so there's a lot of time under his belt. I mean, I wonder if that's something too. Feed that into you too, Erich. I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, like when you dive into this fight card as a whole, it's like, he's in Zuffa boxing pretty significantly, and it seems like he is actively negotiating. And again, we're getting really into the weeds here, but if you look at Zuffa boxing as well, 60% of Zuffa boxing is owned by Sella, which is a company that is formed by Turki Al-Sheikh and seemingly his little I don't even know what you want to call it, his investment fund, right? 60% is owned by Sella, and then 40% is owned by TKO. So he has control of that company, say, assuming that he has Turkey on board, he has control of that company. It doesn't seem like he has control of the UFC right now. So I wonder if Dana is really just going to take a backseat to the UFC as a whole, being it that they, especially if this goes really downhill, right? Like, is the UFC going to turn into like LFA plus, like just slightly better than, maybe not slightly better than LFA, but not like significantly more, and just use the UFC branding to kind of carry them with a really good TV contract? Eventually, the chickens will come home to roost, right? In 7 years, if If Paramount's not happy with the subscriber data by the end, then maybe the sport isn't as more mainstream as it is now. But right now, it has never been bigger. And again, I didn't have an article about this, but sports books reached out to me. This blew my mind. Since Paramount became a part of UFC, the betting numbers have increased 45%. That's bet number, and 43% for bet handle. The sport is growing. You're getting, if you take that just at face value, because there's been no new state launches, there's not like new customers are coming in. 40% increase essentially in bet traffic, which would point to a similar number for new fans. The sport is growing dramatically. So almost like it doesn't matter about what fights they have. Eventually it'll matter, but not for the foreseeable future. That's kind of where the UFC's at right now.
I mean, it's hard to say what correlates off of, in terms of the betting growth and that kind of thing. I'm sure that indicates at least some form of growth in interest and that kind of thing. But, how much do they go together with general fans? That's hard to say, right? We don't really know that. But yeah, I mean, obviously the reach for the UFC probably has never been bigger because they do now have this machine that's very interested in making them be a big part of what they do. I think there's a political mindset alignment here as well that I think goes into that. And frankly, it's the right time. Everything is the right time. They're moving away from pay-per-view, I think was a gigantic opener for the fact that people can watch it more easily now. And I watched the big fights too. That was the thing. You could watch it if you had ESPN Plus, but you didn't necessarily want to pay $80 to watch these guys fight, especially the personalities, I think, are still what drive a lot of fans to watch those big fights. They're not just watching those for the UFC letters. There are people like, hardcore fans. I think all three of us would probably be watching those three letters regardless most weeks, even if we weren't doing the show, we weren't covering it in media capacity. Maybe cherry picking here and there. But also, there's going to be a lot of people, and I know people who really love fights, and I'm sure you guys do too, but they're still like, man, I don't know if I was going to watch that pay-per-view. Like, there's only a few of them I'll do. Now, maybe they're much more inclined to. So yeah, that's talking about the reach. But also, in that sense, Paramount, I feel like realizes, hey, maybe we don't need to put in a whole lot of effort to make the gigantic fight. We'll make like the less gigantic fight, like the good fight. It's not that it's going to be bland. It's not going to be bad. It's going to be just a touch above, but not necessarily able to transcend if it's going to cost them money because they can do it, but they won't do it. They're not interested in doing that.
I do wonder if one day, and I know that this is really getting out there, but if one day, once this TV contract is over, if Dana tries to buy the UFC back from TKO with Turki Al-Sheikh, because maybe the TKO brand, TKO company is, I don't want to say ruining it, but not running it the way that Dana sees fit. We're seeing that, like, Vince McMahon has been trying to buy back the WWE from TKO. Obviously, it's been unsuccessul. But again, I feel like we're seeing that in WWE and we're seeing that in the UFC. I think we're seeing it in the UFC too. Honestly, I think that TKO might be ruining it.
I will say
I don't know that, but again, who's going to get rid of that company if it's making them money? Like, as long as they're profitable, why is TKO going to offload that? That would be the problem. Please go, Jake. Go.
I will say this is. When I was watching the Ronda Rousey bit, I was like, you know what? I'm actually very excited that Netflix is getting into this, and like that PFL has obviously got like a very big year ahead of them. I feel like the only way for the UFC the only thing that would incentivize them to do what they used to do in terms of like really trying to put the best fights that they could put on is competition. And obviously it's a little bit bleak right now, but like the Netflix fight, that'll be big. I'm really honestly kind of pulling for them because that means that fans will get to see better fights. If they do feel like they have somewhat of a fire lit under their butt, maybe that'll be something. But this is the first time for me as a fan, which, I haven't been as long as the two of you guys, but I feel like this is for me the most pessimistic I've been about where we're going in terms of how the quality of fights that we're going to be getting.
Jake, I'm still dubious of the fact, like, is this really going to be enough to push the UFC? I think they can look at what MVP is doing, or anyone else outside of their borders for that matter, and just say, you know what, it's a one-off. It's not like it's going to sustain any sort of storyline. What happens to the winner of Ronda Rousey against Gina Carano? Nothing.
Nothing.
No.
Absolutely nothing. This exists in a vacuum. It's fascinating. I want to watch it. I really do. But also, it's just that, and then we move on, and we probably don't even talk about it much again. Same thing, even if for some reason they were able to put together a Francis Ngannou mega fight against somebody of the caliber of a Jon Jones, you know, who's now got some
Yeah.
acrimony. But if they put that together, what then happens with either of them? You got Francis Ngannou, who probably could just go over to boxing and say, I've already beaten Jon Jones, or I just lost to Jon Jones. I'm going to go to boxing and do that until he's done. And Jon Jones, what else does he want to do? Maybe he wants to box a fight, but the guy is talking about the arthritis in his hip. He's close to 40. You're not going to see him much longer either. So the UFC, as far as they're concerned, probably could just say, you know what? We'll sustain the short-term hit. People move on and they'll forget, and this is where they're going to come for the big fights.
Yeah. Well, I do
I'll
want to
lightly
talk.
push back. I'll lightly push back on that and just say that MVP has tons of potential, and I really do think that Jake Paul as a face of it, while maybe rather than a fighter, as a face of it, he's a good enough promoter that he can do it. Francis Ngannou beats Philip Lins, which he will. Sets up a fight against any heavyweight that's available. Not for nothing, Conor McGregor's got 2 fights left on his deal, and he's not going to get re-signed by the UFC because they're unwilling to probably pay what he's going to want. Jake Paul's going to offer him huge money, and it will break records if he fights Nate Diaz, who's also a free agent, and you know that fight will happen. So if you could just get 2 fights out of Ngannou and then 1 fight Conor and Nate, the sky's the limit. You'll get everybody. You could get everybody. There's an opportunity there at least.
Yeah.
I would love competition. Don't get me wrong. Like something about competition absolutely brings out the best, not just in the quality of the fights, but also in the purses that these fighters are going to get, which I'm a big fan of the fighters actually getting compensated to a level that they deserve. I just am doubtful it's going to be more than a few really big spectacles that don't necessarily add up to anything greater on the whole. If they can continue to make those spectacles on and on and on, different story. But you know, right now we're only talking about a few aging fighters. That's kind of it.
I think we see how it goes with the Gina Ronda thing as far as if Netflix sees it as a success and they're willing to keep backing MVP, then that's a storyline that I'm very, very intrigued to follow along with. But I do want to get Erich's thoughts on one thing that we haven't yet is the White House card. Erich, I want to know your thoughts about that. What was your first reaction? And also, now that you had some time to sit on it, what are your general thoughts on it?
Yeah, I was out and about watching the fight card, and then this popped up on the TV screen. Look, I think that this fight card is definitely a disappointment in terms of the way that Dana hyped it and the negotiations that were seemingly happening behind the scenes. I think it's disappointing. A couple of the fights on here that don't make sense. I understand that they love Diego Lopez, and Diego Lopez has a big social media following. I understand that. Steve Garcia, I have a hard time with. I don't know why Bo Nickal's not fighting Colby Covington. Bo Nickal says that Colby rejected the fight. There's no way that that's true. He definitely would have accepted it if it was offered. It's at the White House. Like, there's no way that he was saying no to it. Hoofy against Chandler. I just don't. My issue isn't even with the top 2 fights. I would have loved Jon Jones, Alex Pereira. Don't get me wrong, but I think that Pereira gone as a co-main event is stellar, and I think that Taporia Gaethje's like whatever. It shouldn't be happening, but it's whatever, right? Like I think the top 2 fights are serviceable. Like they pass, but the next 4, I'm like, what are we looking at here? Like, why is O'Malley not fighting Corey Sandhagen? Zahabi, like that's the best we could do. Like I don't know. I don't like the main. I don't have an issue with the main 2 fights. I have an issue with the 4 other ones. All of them aren't good, and I think that you could have just done so much better. I really do, and it wouldn't even have been like expensive. I think it's bad matchmaking. I don't even think it's a money thing. I think it's really just a bad matchmaking thing. Some of these fights, like I did not need Lopez versus Steve Garcia. I don't care how good the fight is. They're not going to be able to sell it. And then Hoofy versus Chandler missed me with that. Corey Sandhagen should have been on there. I think overall, I think the card's like 7.5 out of 10.
I don't know how much they're trying to sell anything outside of those top 2, maybe 3 fights, though. I think after that, they're just there. I don't think that selling matters too two bits to
That
them,
it
right?
should. It should. I think all of those 6 fights should have been really high-end fights. I think you should have done Shevchenko versus Aaron Blanchfield as a third fight. I think that like you could have really built this thing out and had
I
a
threw
really
that one out
fun.
there that day. Yeah.
Yes, you did. You were right. And that should have been on there. Like O'Malley should be on there too, but he shouldn't be fighting Zahabi, who by the way is a plus 300 underdog, and that's a crazy line. Just gonna throw that out there right now. Maybe hit that before it starts flying. But like, and Michael Chandler's a punching bag. Like, why is he even on there? Like, if you're gonna do Chandler, at least do it like a legend fight. Like, oh my God, I hate this fight card. Kyle Dawkins, another good underdog that I like against Bo Nickel.
I was gonna say that was the one that stuck out to you, right, Bo Nickel? The battle for Pennsylvania, as Scott called it.
The battle for Pennsylvania on Pennsylvania Avenue. This is me, the promoter.
There we go.
Yeah. Before we, because I feel like we're gonna be moving on, right? Like we're just about wrapping up here. The only thing I wanted to get out about the, kind of this whole Ronda thing and the Dana thing here in particular is the. I think the part that's almost heartbreaking, almost heartbreaking, is that when Ronda's talking about where Dana is right now in terms of the UFC structure, it's her criticizing the UFC in a unique way. Everyone who has ever left the UFC and maybe not things not gone exactly the way they wanted for one reason or another, it's time honored tradition. They're going to bash the UFC. But usually Dana White would be lumped in there in some form. This is a very different thing. She's almost looking at Dana as like, I'm not mad at you. I'm sad for you. Like I feel bad for you. And
I'm not
that
mad, I'm
is
disappointed.
that's like, man, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. Exactly. And that kind of thing is just a unique spin on UFC bashing from what we have ever seen. She's bashing the corporatocracy of it rather than, any sort of true self-harm that had been done to her and everything like that. And that's different.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's kind of why I was like, Dana hasn't like come out and like said anything about Ronda in any way, shape, or form, and that's why it kind of led me to I wonder if could he get Turkey to buy it back from TKO so he could save it because it's so it's just in such a different spot than what it was when Dana was around running the show. He was able to do things that like were just really fun. Like randomly he'd be like, you know what, I'm getting Brock Lesnar and I'm gonna do a bunch of things behind the scenes that like get him exemptions for steroid use or whatever. Like he was able to do all of this stuff, even if it wasn't like right. And like it just looks like now that so like the UFC was doing like what are they called? They called them the locker room bonuses, right? That is what they referred to them as.
There's not really a name for them. It's just what they were. Yeah.
So like it just seems like to me that the UFC's in a spot now where they got rid of the locker room bonuses and they're not doing pay-per-view, so all the pay just stays the same regardless of what we're making. And that is probably not the right way to go. I don't know who's making that decision, but that decision shouldn't, I don't care. Like I know everybody's greedy, but that is not the way to go for like and Luke Thomas talks about this is like it'll take a while for any chickens to come home to roost since they have a pretty much a monopoly on combat MMA, but eventually the chickens will come home to roost. It'll just take so long, and that's why it's like, man, I'm sure that I'm obviously I'm not the only one who's down on it right now, but whew, it's a lot of variables.
One thing you touched upon, the kind of the whole thing about the way Dana used to do things when, especially like I've been watching it even longer than you, and this isn't like a measuring contest or anything, but just like going back to that time where Brock was really doing that. That's what kind of got me in. I thought that was fascinating, and I wasn't even a pro wrestling fan at that point, but I got in around that time. But that really coincides with a period where the UFC was still scrappy. They were really fighting to get your attention, to prove who they were and show who they were. They hadn't gotten any major TV deals. We're still watching TV on Spike TV, which was, with Mickey's Irish Red or whatever it was, alcohol. I'm not even a drinker, so I don't even know. But yeah, it was all these different. It was a different time, and they had things that they were trying to do. They were trying to grow the sport. They were trying to defy things, and I think it's almost like I'll borrow a line from The Dark Knight Rises because I'm a big Batman fan. Victory has defeated them in a lot of ways. Dana and them are just not as hungry as they used to be. They couldn't possibly be. And Dana has basically alluded to just as much with top fighters as well. It's the same thing. When they get to that top, they can't possibly be as hungry as they used to be. That's something Dana believes, and I would have to think to some degree it can also apply to him.
Yeah, and that's
Victory
also
has defeated you.
There you go.
that's also why I don't see him like really even caring about like trying to get control of the company. He's like on the Roku documentary.
He's got other things he can do.
Or was it Roku? Yeah, it was the Roku documentary. He's on like this freaking crazy yacht, like watching the fights, like on a crazy vacation. I'm like, that guy doesn't really seem like someone who wants to get back in, you know. But guys, let's get on to Jon Jones. Something that Dana White mentioned at the post-fight presser of UFC 326 when they did announce the white card is, you know, a lot of people had questions on whether or not Jon was going to be on that card, and obviously the answer was no, wondering why not. And Dana was pretty much shooting down the entire notion that Jon was ever meant to be on there. He's saying, no, this guy's retired. I was talking with his managers. I told him it was never going to happen. And he pretty much told everyone, like, Jon Jones is effectively retired. He's never going to fight again. He was talking about his hips and all that. Scott, I want to ask you, what are the ramifications of, you know, those sentiments, if they're true, coming from Dana?
Look, if he's not going to fight him again, then it really depends on how they proceed from here. Because traditionally speaking, a lot of these UFC contracts over the years, they've kind of had to offer a fight every 6 months in order to kind of keep it going, extend the fight, show that we are interested in giving you business, right? So I don't know what Jon Jones' contract looks like, but if that is the case, if they want to keep him under wraps, they're going to have to offer him something and treat him as an actual interested active fighter, because if he's saying he's an active fighter, that's what he is. If they can't meet that, then at least there's a pathway for him to leave. I can't imagine they're going to be interested in doing that like very quickly or very easily, because again, there's start of building acrimony, and there's obviously, you know, well over a decade of transgressions that Jon has committed, either in the UFC's eyes or in terms of our legal system's eyes, frankly. So there's a lot going on into that relationship, right? If I am the UFC though, and I'm thinking like I'm going to try and think like the way the UFC may want to think this through as well, and not just myself. I would think that it might be in their best interest to just find a way to move on and not have this malcontent person who's very interested in still fighting for you. Maybe you have to trot him out and give him a fight that he didn't want and that you don't really want to promote, and then he's there and he's just going to be bashing your model. Like this is the greatest fighter of all time. Dana White has been effusive in his praise of him as a talent and as an accomplished fighter. Obviously, it's different because of the other elements there, but you have that element to it. Why don't you just let the guy go? Move on. You're doing your own thing now, and you don't really see how a giant money factor of a Jon Jones plays into that future. Just let him go. And I could see there being almost like not a piece, but just like, all right, we're done. See you later. But that will be a while if that even were to happen. So, but again, there's so many unknowns here, right, Eric?
Yeah, oh, for sure. So like when you look at this situation, it's like the old school UFC, old school Dana White would be like, we're never letting you out of the contract, but this will tell us a lot. It'll tell us like who's in charge and how does the business side want to run. Like, you know, back in the day, the UFC would just be like, all right, we're just gonna hold you for a while. Like they did it with Nate Diaz. Like they'll was like, we're just gonna hold you for like 2 years, and then by then, like you'll have lost your steam, and then nobody else, like anyone that you go to, won't be getting like the full Jon Jones effect. I think it was a smart move by Jon to ask for his release. He clearly wanted this White House fight. Dana didn't want to give it to him. Obviously, there were some hard feelings about how the Tom Aspinall thing played out. That's Jon's fault, by the way.
It is Jon's fault. You're right.
That is 100% Jon's fault. And when you look at all of the things that have happened over the past 20 years of Jon Jones's career, a lot of it is Jon Jones's fault. But now it's a new ownership. So it's like, how do they want to proceed? Jon versus Francis Ngannou is the biggest fight that can be made outside of the UFC in the entire sport. And I don't think there's a bigger one.
Potentially, right? Yeah.
If they were able to, if they released him, say like next year, the Ngannou fight would happen summer of 27, and that would be massive. But again, the UFC would start losing market share, and Dana would never let that happen. But does TKO care or know enough to even bother with it? Like, they're making enough money as it is. They got a $7.7 billion deal from CBS, which market makers in Wall Street said was a bad deal for CBS. Like, they got so much money that it doesn't matter. Like, all those stakeholders got ridiculously paid, while nothing really changed for the fighters from that perspective anyway. So all of this is to say, like, what are the ramifications of Jon Jones asking us for release? I mean, they could be drastic. I just don't know if anything's going to happen. I want to know. I can't wait to see what happens here. Like, are they just going to not talk about him, like, and just pretend like it never happened and never ask for his release? Like, what happens here?
Honestly, Eric, I maintain what I was saying before. I do think the UFC has a tolerance for these potential one-off fights that can be made outside of their bounds, right? Like they don't. It's not preferred. If they could make it under their own, let's say, parameters, I think they would certainly do it. But if it's going to cost enough, and there's not much that's going to happen from there, frankly, I think they're tolerant enough to say, you know what? Go make your money. I don't care. We're making a lot more money over here and we'll continue to do it. How much longer are you going to continue to do it? I know you see a lot of potential in MVP, and I do too. To be clear, I actually do see there's a passion there. They certainly have some funding there. And there's a willingness to challenge, and they also reach a different demographic than frankly the UFC is reaching right now. They're reaching younger. But if they're just doing these one-off fights, how much does the UFC care? I just don't think they care that much.
It's a solid point,
That's fair.
honestly. And I like what you said, Eric, about like, will this tell us something new about how it kind of seems like the suit effect is in like full swing now more than it has been, even though that, TKO, what was it? I guess Endeavor bought them right after Zuffa, right? That was in, 2016, 2017. It seems like it's taken a few years for that to kind of come into effect, but it seems like it's in full swing. I think that Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou finally being made together on MVP,
Amazing.
that would be absolutely insane.
Wherever you put it on, I'm watching. That's a great fight.
Oh,
yeah.
That is, we're talking about the lineal champion of heavyweight, which is Francis Ngannou, against the guy the UFC then said, okay, he's our UFC champion. After Francis Ngannou left, he also is essentially the greatest fighter of all time. You may get different opinions, but that's basically what he is. You put that fight together, it is absolutely monster sized. But also, again, the lineal title that Francis Ngannou holds is going to die on the vine with him wherever he goes. I almost don't see him losing unless he loses to Jon Jones. And if he loses to Jon Jones is probably not fighting anybody else either. So that's going to end that line. It's going to be somewhere else, and it's probably going to be whichever belt Tom Aspinall or Cyril Gane or Alex Pereira ends up having by the end of those days. So again, there's a limit to how much this is going to really matter, I guess.
Yeah.
One other thing is MVP had just signed this like multi-year broadcasting deal with
ESPN, right?
with ESPN to do like some cards. I think that I believe it was
Women's
just for
boxing, right?
Women's boxing, but I do think it's worth noting that they have a relationship with ESPN now, and ESPN hasn't been thrilled with how the end of their relationship with the UFC. I've talked about this before, even with that article that went up at 2 o'clock in the morning with no byline and Sean Strickland talking about fighter pay. ESPN hates UFC right now. They're pissed at them. So I think that ESPN turning around and working with MVP and maybe trying to help them build out an MMA promotion, I think that's totally in the cards.
Yeah, I mean,
you wonder about what ESPN's feelings were, because obviously you've heard some reports over the years about potential reasons why Top Rank was no longer partnered with ESPN and all that kind of thing. There's some reports out there with regard to how that came about, but there has been a clear move away from combat sports, at least in part on the UFC, and then combat sports also left. On ESPN, and then ESPN saw UFC leave out from under them, went in a partnership that I imagine they were hoping to continue, which really just left them with, before this MVP deal, it was really just PFL in a partnership that they seem almost no interest in promoting. They stick them on ESPN Unlimited. Even when I had the conversation with PFL CEO John Martin, he was saying he has friends who are like, how do I find your fights? And he couldn't even, it was too hard for people to be able to find them. So obviously ESPN had for years kind of allowed a lot of their combat sports to atrophy. So this is a new area where at least they're starting to move toward it. How much are they going to put into it? I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I think part of that's their own creation.
Yeah, and as far as Jon Jones goes, I mean, we'll see if he keeps banging that drum for his release. If he can stir up enough controversy, kind of like you were alluding to, Scott, to have the UFC just be like, fine, go ahead and do your thing. You're only gonna have one or two more fights. I think that's an
If he's
interesting.
annoying enough, yeah.
Exactly, and I mean he is like a big name. Like he could be a big the one example that they're like, all right, fine, this isn't worth the headache.
Don would have to be so annoying to get
He
released. Like
he is
he would
capable.
have. He's capable of being annoying. We've seen it, but like he needs to also not get arrested and be annoying. you know, yeah.
Yeah,
Don't do anything
Does he
crazy.
though? Does he
it's
even need to? Does he even need to do that?
it's not out of the
I
cards.
don't know. He needs to get super annoying though. He's got to like leak some stuff that the UFC doesn't want out. He's got to do some crazy stuff.
Guys, let us know in the comments what you think is the future of Jon Jones and his career.
Hope it's annoying, man. I hope.
That would be cool. But guys, let's finally get to what happened this past weekend at UFC 326. Over the course of 5 rounds, Charles Oliveira dominates Max Holloway in a striking battle on the feet. No, I'm joking. That did not happen, as I was kind of alluding to last week. No, he absolutely outclassed him on the ground, takedowns, all the
On the ground,
grappling.
Jake? On the
Yes.
ground? Is that what we
Yeah,
said?
it was actually on the
That's
ground.
fascinating you say that.
Yeah, in the middle of the fight, he actually grew a Dagestani beard. No.
He said, "Let's talk now."
Yeah, exactly. Eric, I gotta ask you because I mean, in the lead up to this fight, there was a lot of talk about Conor McGregor. He did an interview that did some. I think it was the Smashcast. He said that
Smashcast.
he wanted the winner of the BMF title, which I forgot to mention that is what this one was for. Very important. I gotta ask you, what's next for Charles Oliveira and Max Holloway? Will one of them face Conor McGregor next?
Yeah, so Conor McGregor was saying that he wanted Michael Chandler at the White House, but then the UFC doesn't need him for the White House because that'll sell itself. Again, this is how this is just always the weird ways that business is made behind the scenes. Is like that makes no sense, but okay, sure. So now the dust has settled, right? Charles Oliveira beat Max Holloway. The rumor was that, according to Conor, this isn't even a rumor. That's what Conor said, that he would get the winner International Fight Week, July 11th, against the winner of Charles Oliveira and Max Holloway. Now, Charles Oliveira fought that fight very interestingly. He fought it very safe. He never really took any risks on the ground. He made sure that he got his takedowns and he was going for back control, but never wanted to lose position, didn't want to stand up for too long. I think that it's kind of telling. The way that he fought that fight was kind of different than the way he's fought most of his other fights. And his reaction afterwards, him crying up there and him really feeling emotional, I felt like that side of it, well, he's won titles before. This isn't like the first time he's won a title. This title's also like kind of, I don't know, at least in my opinion, is more meaningless than an actual like the lightweight strap. I feel like Charles Oliveira and Max Holloway were told the winner gets Conor. So, put your best foot forward. And Oliveira fought that fight to make sure that he got the win because he knows that an easy fight against Conor McGregor would be far more lucrative in theory. I don't know how his contract is structured, but far more lucrative if you were to get a shot against Conor. That was my perspective, Scott. I don't know if you had anything different, but my perspective was I thought he fought not to lose and make sure that he gets the Conor payday. Get red panty night. That's what he wanted.
I do not believe that was what motivated him in that cage that night to do what he did. I don't think that was even a factor, to be honest. I think probably if there was any one factor that motivated him to make sure that he got the win in this particular fight against this particular opponent, it's the fact that when he fought him the first time, when he fought Max 11 years ago, and he had that injury that caused the fight to end in 100 seconds before it really got going. And again, when I was talking with Charles, he was talking about the doubts that he had about, is he going to be paralyzed? Is it going to change his life in a meaningful way? Because he couldn't feel the left side of his body. That was the problem. And I think there's an emotional component to it that's much greater with regard to that particular fight. So he was able to have done that and achieve that and that kind of thing. That's my suspicion there. Is that what it is? I don't know. You don't know either. We're just guessing. But as far as the Conor fight, I'm still going to file this under believe it when I see it. Conor is an active fighter when I see him in there throwing a punch. That's what he is. But I will say there actually is a lot of sense to be made out of this fight materializing because For Charles, you just don't know what to do with this guy. He has very clearly dominantly lost to the champion. He did have a loss to Arman Tsarukyan. If they wanted to have that rematch, I think that at least would make some sense. But they don't. I don't. Who knows what they want to do with Arman? You can't really guess at this point. He's an enigma in terms of where his career goes. So I think in terms of Charles do Bronx, I think the best thing you can do is if he is able to get a fight with Conor McGregor and they're able to get him a financial number that does make a difference for him, because he's been very clear the only reason he wants to fight Conor is that money that could potentially come with it. Does that even happen in a Paramount era? I don't know. But if
Exactly.
it can, and
That's
if it does, then on the other side, it certainly makes a lot of sense for Conor, because if he wins that fight, he justifiably gets a belt. He's probably going to be happy to promote himself as the BMF for real, finally. And also, you can say, let's put him in a title fight because he beat somebody who essentially is not the number one contender, but the number two contender. It's a real fight. I think it does sell itself in so many brilliant ways. Is it actually going to happen in International Fight Week? I don't know. It seems like when Conor outs himself as a way that this is where it's going to go, that's where it's not going to go. So,
The
who knows?
opposite of
Maybe
Mystic
he should just
Mac.
keep his mouth shut, because the UFC doesn't like when fighters ruin their plans about announcing stuff, and then he can actually get something. But, that's not the way he's going to ever operate.
Yeah, I don't think he cares about that anymore.
I
don't think
know.
he ever did.
I don't know how
but
much he
especially
did.
not
He
now.
never really did. Yeah.
Yeah, he never did, but he definitely doesn't now.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I'm just curious though. I'll throw this back to you, Eric. Where does that leave Max Holloway before we move on? What do you see for him?
I'm actually going to go hot take, and I'm just going to say that you don't need a belt when Conor fights, and that I don't like the Charles Oliveira matchup for him at all, and I think that he should fight Max Holloway.
It's doable.
Having said all of
After
that,
seeing Charles's performance, I actually don't hate that. I'm curious what you think, Scott.
Can I tell you? I'm going to give you 4 names, and obviously 2 of them are not going to fight each other because they just fought. But I'm going to give you 4 names, and you put them together just about any other way, and I'm fine with it. Max Holloway, Charles Oliveira, Conor McGregor, Benoit Saint-Denis. Give them whoever of those 2 you
Any
want,
mix.
and I think it's still either way. It makes sense. I think you can do it either way, and it's fine. You would not do obviously Conor and Benoit. That doesn't
Okay,
make
thank God.
a
I don't
ton
want
of
to see him
sense.
die.
But those 2 opponents for the 2 guys who just fought, you can put one against the other, and I can see the benefits of either way. So that would make sense. I would put that together, either combination.
I like
Sign me up for Conor McGregor, Max Holloway is the fight, and Oliveira can go figure it out with Benoit Saint-Denis.
Yeah, I mean,
That would be a good BMF fight, right? It would.
Yeah.
That's why it's like there's almost no loser here if they can put that together, or any version thereof.
yeah, I feel like we're closer than ever to having them be like, all right, the BMF is done. Like, I don't know if you need the branding of it anymore.
Fine by me.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, guys, let's move on to a different topic. Because we did just come off of a pay-per-view week, we have released our monthly New York
Numbered
Post
event week, Jake.
Excuse me.
Pay-per-view in
Silly.
Europe.
That is true. Thank you, Eric. We did release our
We are the European Post.
yes, we did release our monthly New York Post MMA rankings, world MMA rankings, taking all the different fighters from all the different promotions around the world. Some notable things off the top of my head: Strickland moves up 2 spots over Nasruddin Imavov and Fluffy Hernandez, and Loner Kavanaugh with his upset over Brandon Moreno pushes him out. Scott, you wrote a column about this, as you will every time that we do these rankings. What were some other things that I missed out on, and some things that you noticed?
Well, the column, just for the record, it doesn't even have to do with any of that stuff. I was thinking more like along the lines of what the heavyweight title picture is now with this interim fight and Alex Pereira coming up, and whether it's the right thing. Are we going to call him a triple champion at that point or not? Read the column. It's more along those lines. But yes, it does contain our updates as far as our rankings, that kind of thing. You should seek that out. The main thing that I wanted to highlight is in that middleweight division, right? Obviously, we had already agreed a couple weeks ago that Sean Strickland had done enough to leapfrog Nasruddin Imavov to get that title shot. I think that was at least a collective agreement. I don't know, was it unanimous? Did we all agree? I'm trying to remember, but I think we more or less settled on that. That makes more sense, right? That was number one. That was an interesting element of it, and I don't think it's that controversial, right? The other element in the middleweight division, I have to point this out because there's going to be people who will seize on it, right? If they do notice this, we in our middleweight picture, we have both Johnny Eblen and Costello Van Steenis in it. But we have Eblen, who just lost to Van Steenis, ranked one spot ahead of Costello. This is by virtue, randomly, of Jake actually putting Johnny Eblen in his own rankings this month as opposed to last month, which because of Erich having CVS out of his rankings and Eblen so high up, it actually flipped them over that way. So just take note of that, guys. It's all just kind of the way it's Jake's fault for actually valuing Johnny Eblen. Yes, it is your fault, Eric.
It is 100% my fault. I have so here's my thing about it is Eblen was such a big favorite in that fight and won every second of that fight besides the last minute. It's like I'm big on Johnny Eblen. I don't know.
He lost round 4 though, Eric. He did lose round 4.
Did he lose round 4 on the scorecards? I
thought
he was up. Was he? Oh wow. I don't know why I remembered him winning. I remember watching the fight.
If that fight holds on for 9 more seconds, I can't remember off the top of my head. If it makes it to the bell, we're talking about either a split decision win for Johnny Eblen or a draw. That is what it would have been.
Man, I gotta rewatch that.
Well, I will say this: you redeemed yourself, Eric, in some senses, because if we look at our heavyweight rankings, Gable Steveson is no longer in your picks. Would you care to explain to how you came to that conclusion, even coming off of a win?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with his most recent opponent, Hugo Lazama. He was 11-2, but
a solid veteran, but mostly a light heavyweight.
Okay, well, he was gassed within a minute and a half. He could barely stand up. I don't know if he took that fight on short notice, but Gable Steveson looked terrible. And it was the longest we've seen him fight, right? He fought for 3 minutes and 50 seconds. His previous finishes were in under 30 seconds. His previous finishes. Gable Steveson looked terrible. His striking looked bad. He got roundhouse kick to the face. Easily could have knocked him out if the guy had able to keep his balance, which he wasn't. Yeah, I apologize. He is not a. Would
you say that rather than looking terrible, he looked like a prospect?
Yeah. He looked like not a top 50 heavyweight, which is what he probably isn't. So,
well,
got a little excited. I'll just be honest. I'm tired of the heavyweight lull, and I was hoping that Gable Steveson would get me excited. And I'm not selling all of my stock. I'm just not buying anymore. How about that?
Fair enough.
I think you could buy stock in him. I think no. Listen, I'm actually gonna push back on that. I think you can absolutely buy stock in this guy, but I do think you just gotta allow him time, right? Because someone like a Daniel Cormier, for example, I remember when he made his UFC not his UFC debut. I remember when he made his MMA debut on the regional scene, and it was a little rougher. It was rough around the edges. He came in with a lot of hype off of his Olympic accolades and his wrestling background and that kind of thing. And we were expecting that he would do something. It took him a little bit, but honestly, he got there much quicker than you would have thought relative to the start, because he ended up winning the Strikeforce World Heavyweight Grand Prix as the fill-in that jumped in. But yeah, I don't know that we can read too much into these prospect fights. He's getting experience. He's getting things under the ground. I think it's much better that he fought longer, honestly, than just fighting for like 30 seconds at a time. He had to experience stuff. So I'm actually buying on Gable Steveson as a prospect in this sport, but I'm not buying on him as a rank contender.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I already am overexposed to Gable Steveson, so I can't be buying anymore. I'll be broke if it doesn't work out.
Once he beats a top 2015 heavyweight, maybe we could talk about it, I think. But guys,
we're ways away from that.
Yeah.
He'll probably get a title shot.
We'll talk more about him later. I know we will.
Yeah, he'll probably get a title shot before he fights a top 15 heavyweight.
That's not out of the cards. Well, let's go ahead and talk about this weekend. Now that we're all caught up, we've got all the past sorted out, and we've got to our rankings. Let's talk about this weekend. Josh Emmett versus Kevin Vallejos. And guys, we just finished talking about rankings. We've got two guys over here. Eric, I want to ask you, do you think that this fight can spawn a top 10 featherweight?
Kevin Vallejos is a Kevin Vallejos, 24 years old. Eric. Yeah, killing it. 24 years old. Had a banger of a fight on the Dana White Contender Series against John Silva. actually. Lost that fight by unanimous decision, but an absolute banger. Look, Vallejos is a really, he looks like a solid contender. He's super young. Again, he's fighting a 41-year-old Josh Emmett. I wish this fight happened 5 years ago, but obviously I don't want Vallejos to be, 19. I want to be 24 and Emmett to be 36. In this fight, you're looking at, Kevin Vallejos, really good striking, and also he has some grappling chops too. I don't like this fight for Josh Emmett, but it's hard to like any fight when you're 41 years old. He's just so old, and he's had multiple reconstructive knee surgeries. Obviously, Emmett's a massive underdog. He's plus 450 on the money line. Vallejos is minus 650. So, could we see? Featherweight needs some contenders, and going over to my rankings, I have Steve Garcia 10. A newcomer for me was Razbali Shailadulev. I don't know exactly how to pronounce that name yet, but he's over at Ryzen. And the only name that I saw him beat was Juan Archuleta, who used to be a Bellator fighter. And he's just starching everybody in the first round. He has a fight coming up in April. But yes, I think we need some new blood here in featherweight, and I think that Vallejos is a perfectly good contender, and someone that could really make some noise here.
What do you think, Scott? Do you think he cracks top 10 for you, or?
No, not now. No, he's not there yet. But I do think even with an impressive win here, I think he's still not there, but he's on the doorstep. I think he's not in the group of like Steve Garcia, Arnold Allen, Patricio Pitbull, those guys that we all kind of had near the bottom of our rankings as well. He's not there, but I think he's very close with a win here. You start to really say, okay, that next matchup, I'd be really interested to see who it is against and how he does in that, because then you might be talking about him very rapidly getting into these rankings. He has a notable loss on Dana White Contender Series to John Silver, right? That's the one that I think it's like, okay, there's a measuring stick. We know at least he's not quite there from a few years ago, but maybe he gets back to the point where he can get a rematch one day. We're talking down the line. I'm excited for what he could be, but again, I'm going to temper my expectations about how quick he gets into that top 10. On the Emmett side, good Lord, there's no chance that he can get into the top 10 with a win here. I'm sorry. He's 41, like you said, reconstructed knee surgeries, like you said. He's also 1-4 in his last 5 fights. He is fighting here to stop the hemorrhaging of his career. Yep. Because if he loses this, honestly, I have to wonder if the UFC is in the Josh Emmett business anymore. I mean, he's a fun fighter, and I think he seems like a good dude. I certainly don't root against him. But also there's a limit to how much you can really regard this guy as a top guy anymore. This is absolutely his last chance to headline, without question.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be headlining anyway, honestly.
Fair enough. Well, we will see what happens on Saturday night, and we'll talk about it next week. But guys, let's talk about some of the other fights to watch outside the main event. Scott, who do you want to watch?
I've got Bia Mesquita against Monse Rendon. Mostly for Mesquita because I'm very curious how her world-class grappling translates to this MMA career that she is now putting her energy and interest into, especially at women's 135, which is a very shallow division in terms of talent pool. I think by the end of the year, we might even be talking about her as a top 5. I don't think that's crazy.
And how about you, Eric?
Yeah, so I got Steven Aspelund versus Vitor Petrino. I've always been on the Vitor Petrino bandwagon. I think he's got the craziest body of anyone in heavyweight. He's just like looks like a Greek god. It's crazy, a Brazilian god rather. But regardless, he's fighting Steven Aspelund, who's also, and like low-key, a fan favorite in the UFC, someone that they really should be trying to build up. He has a very interesting story where he battled obesity like really bad, and he has battled back, and he is now a UFC athlete, and he is 2-0 in the UFC. I believe he set the record for significant strikes in a 3-round heavyweight fight with 170 last time against Sean Sharaf. Vitor Petrino is super talented. At one point, I thought he'd be a heavyweight champion. Hasn't gone there yet. But honestly, he fights without like a whole lot of urgency, which is my issue with him. He fights like kind of lazily, and I don't like that. And I think that Aspelund is such a fan favorite that maybe he'll bring out the best in Vitor Petrino. Maybe. We'll see. I think it's a fascinating fight either way you look at it. It's my fight of the night for sure.
Alrighty, very nice. For me, I have Chris the Action Man Curtis versus Mityabek Oralbai, and it is not just because his name is fun to say in a
Mityabek Oralbai.
Yes, exactly. It's not just because his name is fun to say, and I will be continuing the trend of picking fighters who have fun names to say. But he's also been involved in. I have no choice. Come on. He's also been involved in some very, very good fights. He had a fight of the year contender in what was it, last year or 2024. The guy comes to scrap, so I have high hopes for it from an entertainment perspective as well.
Orlbai's getting really close to the top 25, I think, in the world at welterweight. So, like, I mean, there's talent there, absolutely, and he is on the rise. So, yeah, he's moving. So,
nice favorite.
I'm interested in his progression as well.
100%, and that's also in a newer weight class. He'd moved up, if I'm not mistaken.
I moved down. He wasn't he middleweight? This is a welterweight fight, isn't it?
I got it wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, Scott, let's talk about the encompassing of this card in the event rating. What's the number we got for this one?
We've got a 49. It's virtually identical. Another Goldbergism there from the final rating of 326, which ended up, obviously they lost a fight last week between the time we had our show and the time the fights happened. So that adjusts the rating a little bit. They're almost exactly the same. It's kind of remarkable. The co-main for this one, we didn't even mention this, and I know this is what fight Eric is looking forward to. Amanda Lemos against Jillian Robertson. That is a top 10 affair at women's 115. That's the co-main. It's actually higher rated than the main. The main is rated more like a co-main, so it kind of splits the difference either way. We're talking about 10 out of the 28 fighters on this card are top 30 in the world. 20 of them in the top 75. Only 3 are outside the top 150, and nobody's below 210. There's a lot of good depth here. It's a solid card, well booked, deep. They've been doing this with these Apex cards for honestly a little while now, and I continue to believe that this is a purposeful approach to the philosophy of the matchmakers meetings when they book these cards at the Apex. I think they're looking to make them deep enough with talent that they're hoping will get to the top end and be competitive.
Alrighty, there we go. Eric, why don't you tie a bow on this fight night and give us your three bets in 3 minutes?
Thank you, Jake. Yeah, UFC 326 wasn't a bad showing. Got a little lucky though. Admittedly, we needed 2-point deductions by Zhao Long in order to get a decision for Cody Garbrandt. Hit the plus 300 there. Basically split the main event or co-main event. Had fight to go the distance and RDR plus 3.5. So split there, and then lost on the main event to Max Holloway. We're back to profitability, so we're hovering a little bit, but feels good to get a lucky one. I feel like I get kind of screwed out of decisions all the time, especially close ones or point deductions or stuff like that. So we move on. UFC Fight Night. We are going to the Apex. 3 minutes on the clock. And here we go. We start on the prelims, one of the opening fights, actually, and this is actually Scott's fight to watch. Bia Mesquita versus Montese Rendon. Rendon, not a terrible fighter by any stretch of the imagination. She's 2-1 in the UFC. This fight's taking place at women's bantamweight. Here's the betting angle that I really want to take, and I actually had this when Mesquita won by submission in the second round in her UFC debut. Women's fights go the distance at women's bantamweight between 60 and 65% of the time. That's a lot. You're getting here fight to go the distance at plus 160. That's the real whole betting angle, honestly. Like fighter go to hell. Like even if you're like a big time bona fide finisher, the math says what the math says. We're taking fight goes the distance plus 160, especially grappling. I think that Rendon's actually pretty solid there. Maybe she gets submitted. Maybe Mesquita's just that good. But for me, I'm taking this one to go the distance plus 160. We stay on the prelims. And we are going Vitor Petrino versus Steve Asplund. Again, I talked about this in my fight to watch just before. Asplund is a really, really good striker. And he's like high volume, kind of reminds me of Sean Strickland a little bit, just at a heavier weight class. Now, where things get dicey for Asplund is if this fight goes to the ground, and you bet your butt that Vitor Petrino isn't going to want to strike with him. Stephen Asplund, and this is kind of a deep cut, but Asplund was submitted by Denzel Freeman at an LFA. You guys might remember Denzel Freeman, who looked like one of the worst fighters on the UFC roster against Josh Hockett last time out. If Asplund gets taken down here, I think he's cooked. And I think that Vitor Petrino, who's more than capable enough in grappling, he's actually pretty solid. He took down Marcin Petrino 4 times and submitted him via arm triangle. So this one, it's going to depend on what you have access to. I'm going to have over 1.5 takedowns on sleepers, minus 110. And Petrino by submission is plus 270 on FanDuel. I like either of those. Petrino's just a beast. And honestly, I mean, unless he's just being extra lazy this time around, which is possible because we've seen him be pretty lazy before. Just get a takedown, get a sub, and exit stage left, and maybe get some rub. We move on to the main event. We are going Josh Emmett versus Kevin Vallejos. Josh Emmett's 41. Kevin Vallejos is 24. Kevin Vallejos, seemingly a better striker at this point. Obviously, Josh Emmett's gonna have a puncher's chance against anybody. But I honestly, I think that this is just Emmett's going down and Vallejos is going up. I actually think that there's value here, even though it's a minus 600 favorite for Vallejos. I'm gonna go Vallejos and over 2.5 rounds. So this would cover if he finishes the end of the third round or fourth or fifth or wins by decision. Vallejos is also plus 270 on the decision line. I don't hate that either, but I just prefer the over 2.5 in case Emmett really gasses out here. Again, he's 41. He got 10-7 in a round by Ilia Topuria. I think Vallejos rolls here. If you want to throw him in parlays, feel free to do so. This is a showcase spot for the young gun. We go on to the passes card. 3 bets in 3 minutes is done. Thank you, and let's make some money, eh?
Alrighty, thank you so much for that, Eric, and let's throw it over to Scott for quick hits.
Well, guys, first up, we have a change to the headliner for the April 25th event at the Apex. It is no longer Sean Brady against Joaquin Buckley. We now have a 5-round featherweight main event between Aljamain Sterling and Yusuf Zalal. And it's unclear what's going to happen to that original headliner, but again, that's what we're working with right now. A little more soon than that, there's an update to UFC 327. Beneil Dariush told the Overdogs podcast that his opponent for April 11, Manuel Torres, he has been forced out due to injury, so he's waiting for a new opponent. Also related to 327, this was a little bit of inspected, but now it's more or less official. Cub Swanson has identified his fight on this card against Nate Landwehr as his retirement fight from competition after 22 years as a pro. Also coming off of this past weekend, Reiner de Ritter fell out of our rankings, of course, with a loss to Kyle Bahalio, his second defeat in a row. He is now going, as he announced on his Instagram, he's going to head back up to 205 pounds. He had previously been one championships middleweight and light heavyweight champion before coming to the UFC, so not a crazy move here. And then lastly, some more movement in personnel on the UFC roster. We have 2 more fighters who have been let go by the promotion, according to MMA Fighting. No longer on the roster are Chris Moutinho and Eric Silva. And that is everything, guys.
Alrighty, thank you, Scott. And guys, let's go to the final round. Let's talk about our homework, which we had a little bit more time to complete. Thanks to your boy Jake. Dominic Cruz versus Cody Garbrandt back in 2016. This one went differently than I expected. I've seen a lot of clips, obviously, because this is Cody's, most famous performance for sure. Him going into the Matrix and all that, and it was a little bit different in the sense that I didn't realize it wasn't as sustained. It was a closer fight for a decent amount of the rounds. Round 4, though, that was when things really started to go Cody's way, and where a lot of the clips that I've kind of seen online came from. But I will say, it did seem like for the majority of the fight that Cody was kind of in control. And obviously, we haven't seen a performance of this caliber from him since then. It just kind of seemed like a very good matchup for him.
Yeah. I could debate whether he was truly in control the whole time. The way I've always looked at this fight, or have come to understand this fight, because I've seen it a few times, is especially rounds 1, 2, and 5. I think Cruz is still doing what he wants, and he's accomplishing what he wants, and he's kind of just eking out rounds. But rounds 3 and 4 are a borderline disaster for him. And that is why Cody Garbrandt absolutely not only won the fight, but deserves to have won the fight, is because he really put Dominic Cruz in the worst way that we had ever seen him in. Basically, from the time he was not a prospect anymore. He fought Uriah Faber way too early in his career, so that fight almost gets thrown out of that way. I think here it's a case where the scoring is so bizarre that it's good. It's a good thing it was all over the place. It allowed Cody Garbrandt to get the win he deserved. But honestly, if I was to score it with the actual scoring criteria today, I'd probably score it a draw.
Oh my
I
God,
know.
really?
I'm not saying I believe it. I'm saying that's what the criteria would allow me to do, Eric. That's the way it
You'd only
works.
give him
Like
three and four? How do you? I don't understand
yes,
how you give him.
yes.
I looked at the scorecards and I thought that round one and two also went to Cody. I don't understand how you don't have round one and two for. I could see five, but round one and two I still had for Cody, and I understand that that Dominic was more more active in the volume, but Cody was making him look stupid on the misses and was landing more impactful shots. I was
But
really
it's not.
confused
There's
by
no
that.
scoring for looking stupid on the misses. It's all about what you land.
Yeah, but isn't it damage too? Like Cody was more damaging in
It's
those
just
two rounds
damage.
too.
Yeah.
But
You
Cody
can
was more
debate it. You
damaging
can
in those.
debate it.
It's
I'm not
close.
telling you it's definitive, but I'm of the mind that Cruz did enough in rounds 1, 2, and 5. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Cody had two bad knockdowns on Dominic there in round four, and one of the funniest things. Then we can move on.
Huge round. Huge round.
One of the funniest things was when Dominic goes for a punch or it gets knocked down. Cody looks at him and just looks at him like he was like, "Come on, dude, really? You thought that was gonna work?" Like he looks at him and like his movements and his styling on Dominic is so iconic that the Cody Garbrandt character in the video game, all of his movements in that fight are usable in the game. Where he's like doing like the Mr. Robot and then like the look at him like, "Come on, dude!" Like
Very Nate
just like the
Diaz-esque.
look of pure disappointment is hilarious.
You bring up Nate Diaz. That's interesting because he did the same stupid thing that Nate Diaz does, where he points instead of just fighting more because he could have
Stupid.
finished the fight. He just chose not
Yes.
to.
It's like
And
it's
Nate does this all the time. He could have beat
Yes.
Conor McGregor in that second fight too. He did the same thing.
it's the
And it's
meme.
so
And
stupid.
Leon Edwards.
It's
Leon
the meme
Edwards,
where it's like the two
most
buttons
famous
and the
one.
guy's sweating, and it's like finish your opponent emote, and they're like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Emote,
he's
emote,
bashing
emote.
emo. It's
Yeah.
just this is not how you win a fight. And that's you know what? It's almost like the karma caught up to him because his career just absolutely resembled nothing like that virtuoso, especially rounds 3 and 4. But the fight itself in general.
Well,
worth it.
and one more thing I know before we gotta go. TJ Dillashaw, he fights TJ Dillashaw right after. And man, the biggest sliding doors moment in MMA history, in my opinion. He knocks down TJ Dillashaw at the end of that first round, the next fight, and TJ is on Wobble Street. He is like, if there was 10 more seconds in that round, he's done. And then he doesn't get the finish, gets finished the next round, and then his career falls off a cliff. Just a disaster for him. If he get that finish, he'd have a totally different career. But we saw him this past weekend, total shell of himself, unfortunately.
All right. Well, guys, let us know in the comments what you thought about that homework assignment. And Scott, what is our next homework assignment for us to look forward to?
I have put together the Gina Carano experience. This is every fight of her 8-fight career. Again,
Wow.
only 8 fights. And she has not fought in 17 years now. But we can pretty quickly digest the whole career. So I said, why don't we just watch them all? We can put the links in the description here to make it easier for everybody.
Absolutely. Alrighty, we'll put those down there. And Scott, what happened this week in MMA before we get out of here?
Going back to March 11, 1994, 32 years ago, sirs, the UFC 2 was staged as the only 16-man one-night tournament in the promotion's history. The winner, Royce Gracie, once again.
Double time. And for those who are looking for one more fight this weekend who can't get enough, what can they look forward to?
Check out on Saturday afternoon, at least Eastern time, we have KSW 116. It is headlined by Adrian Bartoshinsky, the welterweight champion, who I had highlighted as my welterweight prospect back in the spring or in the fall, excuse me, when we did that. He's fighting Madars Betolds Fleminas. I've probably butchered that one, but that is our welterweight title picture. I'm actually sort of interested as well on the undercard of this. There's a light heavyweight matchup between Sergius Zayak against Damian Pivovarchik. Gosh, I'm trying here, guys.
I know
These
you are.
not
Those are
easy
tough
European
names,
names.
man.
I'm doing my best here. But we're talking
could
about
do
these
way
are
better.
guys who are basically top 60 lightweights going against one another. So talking about the level of competition here is at least UFC caliber, if not even a little higher. I think there's some interest there. That is a KSW pay-per-view, so watch that online.
All right, guys, we made it. Scott, Erich, thank you so much, and to you at home. Hope you do your homework. Hope you enjoy this episode of the podcast, and we will see you next week.